Yeah, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, welcome to Raider World. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. That way when I put out new videos, you guys get notified. And for all my returning viewers, thank you so much for supporting the channel and returning back to watch another great install video. So yeah, here we have the T-bar setup that I'm going with. As you can see, there are different companies on this table. Now these companies do sell full setups if you want to go with just one company. But for me, I have OCD and I have this other thing called where I can't choose what I want. So I just kind of marry things together because that's the way I want it to look. So to start this off, I did choose to go with the Death Metal Racing 8-inch risers. These are the Destroyer risers, has that 1-inch pullback. And I did choose to go with a heads-up display clamp because I'm getting rid of the gauges. Don't like the gauges in the front, don't like the gauges in the back. So I wanted to get rid of that, give it a clean look. So with that heads-up display, I did choose to go with the Koso North America D2 digital gauges. These are for 2014 and up baggers. It does come with an extension harness and everything else to make sure everything reaches. I did choose to go with the Death Metal Racing Power Vision housing. That way I can get more information. It does come with a clamp with a extension arm. I'll show you exactly how to get that all installed. So here we have the Thrash and Supply top tree. You guys already know, big fan of Thrash and Supply. It does have a locking mechanism on it. It does come with riser bolts, so you can get those installed onto your risers. This is hard mounted, so you don't need any riser bushings. And then you have the option to mount them closer to you or further away. Now it did take me a while to choose what bars I wanted to go with because all these companies have great handlebars. But for me, I wanted to try out something new. Now these are the Sandoval open road adjustable bars. Now I've never installed these, never ridden with these. Really looking forward to getting these installed and riding with these. That way I can give you guys some feedback on how these bars are. Now these do have a 5.5-inch rise. This is why I went with a 8-inch riser. I was going back and forth on whether I wanted a 10-inch riser or an 8-inch riser, but went ahead and went with an 8-inch. And because these bars are hard mounted, there's no bushings. I did want to have some kind of support, you know, that vibration. So the bushings are built into the bars, which is great. Kraus does have a QR code that you can scan and it'll show you exactly all the step-by-step instructions on how to get this installed. But I'll show you exactly what I learned when I put these on and whenever I ride them. Now, if you are going with thinner bars, Death Metal Racing does have adapters that you can use if you're going from 1 1/8 to 1 inch. Add those spacers, that'll give you the option to add 1-inch bars. Now for these handlebars, you will be able to use your stock brake assembly and your stock clutch assembly, but you will not be able to use your stock perch clamps. They're just a little bit too big and they do have locking pins that prevent you from mounting it on. So I did pick up a set of Proline perch half clamps from Kraus. These are in black. They do have these in polished finish. So make sure you pick up a set of half clamps. So yeah, this is gonna be a longer video. You guys already saw in the lower right-hand corner. If you're doing this on your own or with some help, it should take you no more than 4 or 5 hours. But other than that, guys, this is gonna be fun. So let's go. So heading into the Wesley Chapel Harley Davidson, gonna get this keyless ignition installed. It's usually, you know, comes on the CVOs, but you can get it done to your bike where you could just start your bike right here. You don't need this ignition switch here. So ignition, delete, keyless ignition, whatever you want to call it. Getting rid of this so I can get rid of all these, getting rid of the gauges, getting rid of everything. And installing the Death Metal Racing risers with the Kraus handlebars.
YouTube guy.
Yeah. Matt, hey, how's it going, Orlando? Yeah, because I'm installing T-bars, so I'm just doing the ignition delete on here, or keyless ignition. What do you call it? Ignition delete? Keyless ignition?
We call it CVO start.
Oh, CVO start.
It's a little nickname.
Okay.
We know that the CVOs have that.
All right, cool. All right, so we did the CVO start, ignition removal, keyless start, whatever you want to call it. I believe it's called the CVO start. So this is no longer operational. So now everything is just up here. Wait for it to go through its sequence. That's it. So the first thing I want to do is cover up the tank and cover up the front fender. You don't want any tools falling and scratching up your paint. Then next, I'll remove the outer fairing. I will be removing the headlight because I do want to pull those wires back, get everything nice and tight, snug those up. That way we have a clean look. So I'll remove the windshield. You have 4 screws right here. So this vent pops right up. There's only 2 clips holding it in. I'll go ahead and disconnect the turn signals. So I'll put 2 windshield screws back in to support the outer fairing while I'm taking out the other screws. Now, if you have wind deflectors or a fairing spoiler kit, all you have to do is remove the bottom Torx screws on the left and right side, and they're a T25. Now, you have 2 Torx screws near the speakers, and they're a T27. Now, I'll take out the right and the left turn signal bolts. The turn signals do stay attached to the outer fairing. And for these bolts, I'm using a 3/16 hex bit. All right, now that I have all the bolts removed, I just have to take out these 2 windshield screws supporting the outer fairing and take it off. Now I'll remove the headlight. I do have a lot of harnesses up here with some extra plugs. That's because I have a stereo system along with some other adapters. But if you follow your headlight back, you should see some screws down in the back right there. You have 2 on the top, then you have 2 on the bottom. So for the top 2 screws, I'll use an extension with a 3/16 hex bit. Now just make sure you're holding on to your headlight when you're removing the bottom 2. Now, because I do have LED vent turn signals, I do have to disconnect these. But if you don't have these, just disconnect your headlight right here. Now, this is a Hogworks headlight. I will not be reinstalling this headlight. I will be installing the all new Hogworks Performance LED headlights. I'll cover that in the later video. Now, this is a little easier if you're not on a lift. That way you're able to turn your handlebars. You gotta be able to reach those screws that are by the nacelle. And if you turn your handlebars, you're able to reach those a little bit easier with an extension. But because I am on a lift, I do have to raise the front of the bike up just so I can clear that wheel chock. Just make sure if you are doing that, that your bike is strapped down. So for your instrument bezel, you have a Torx screw on your right side and a Torx screw on the left side. And these are a T25. So here you have your ignition switch cover. Go ahead and push down on that. Just work that out. Now, if you're going with this setup, obviously you're not reusing any of this, but if you want to use it on something else, you just want to be careful with this cover. This tab right here breaks off really easy. So I'll go ahead and turn the ignition switch. Now, I don't know if the COSO gauge retains any information off your gauges, so you want to make sure that you write your mileage down on a piece of paper before you disconnect anything. Get that mileage down. That way you can enter that mileage into your new gauges. So to remove this instrument bezel, you have 2 connectors on the bottom, and you have 1 connector right here for your gauge cluster. Now, the right side connector, that release tab is on the bottom. You just push up on that and pull it out. And then on the left side, that release tab is on the top. Now, to disconnect the center connector, you have a tab on the right side and a tab on the left side. Just slowly pull those off. You don't want to break those tabs off. So you have your fairing skirt screw on the bottom, and then you have one on the top right here on each side. So for the screws on the nacelle, it's a T40. Now, because I do have the fairing spoiler kit, I can't access this screw right here. But if you didn't have this, you can easily access the screw right here. So I'll access it from the other side. Now for the nacelle, you have 2 retaining clips holding them together. Just pull it apart and they'll pop right out. So once you pull the screws out from the top and the bottom, this is just held together by these 2 plastic retaining clips. You just pull those apart and this will come off. So for this plate right here, you're not going to reuse this. You're going to take your handlebar switch harnesses out. You have your right handlebar switch harness. It does have the run stop switch connected to it, so it's kind of hard to mix that one up. It's on your right side. And then you have your left handlebar switch harness. That's all by itself. It only goes on to 1 connector. And then you have your twist grip sensor. That only goes on to 1 connector. Then you have your heated grip connector if you have heated grips. Now for the 2 bottom auxiliary connectors, not going to reuse those. So I'll zip tie those and I'll tuck them back with the rest of the wiring. And then you have your center gauge cluster connector. This is going to connect to the COSO gauge with their wiring harness. Now for some of these other wires that I have are for my power vision and also a phone connector. So just ignore those wires. And then if you have other connectors in here, you can also take those off just to make sure you don't get them mixed up. So for this twist grip sensor, I'll use a plastic prying tool to pop this little Christmas tree retention post out. I'll go ahead and disconnect my twist grip sensor. So before I take these out, I went ahead and marked them. I have my right handlebar switch harness, my run stop switch, and my left handlebar switch harness. So if you want to get these out, you have a tab on each side. Kind of just press down on those with a pair of needle nose pliers, just lightly. You don't want to press too hard, and kind of just work them out from there. Now, because this is solid mounted metal on metal, you don't need this ground connector. I'll go ahead and disconnect this. So for any of these connectors I'm not using, I'll go ahead and tape them off. Now what I'll do is cut any zip ties holding these wires down or the brake lines, get that all off. That way we can get these tucked back so we can get these bars off. So here you have your ignition switch. You can take this off. You're not going to need this anymore. You have tabs on the sides and kind of just push those out, kind of work them off. So I'll get the right side brake master cylinder off. Now because I do have a 03D perch mount on here, it's a 3/16 hex bit, but they're usually a T27. And then I'll cover it up in a bag so it doesn't scratch anything up. Now for the left and the right side hand control modules, I like to get all of this off while they're still mounted to the bike because you do have that clamp holding it down. And in some cases, you can get your wiring out while your bars are still mounted to the bike. So I'll see if I can do that with these. If not, then I'll just get the bars off. So for the switch housing, you have 2 screws, one on the top and one on the bottom, and they're a T25. So for these screws, they won't come out. They're retained in the housing. So you have your handlebar switch harness and then you have your run stop switch. So you can take these out. You have a tab on the top. I usually use a picking tool to push down on those and then pull it out. And then you have a latch right here. You can use a picking tool to kind of lift up on this latch. You just want to be careful with this ribbon right here. You don't want to damage that. So from here you can pull off your grip. So for your trigger finger switch cap, you just push up on this and then you're going to pull out this way. So here you have your left side handlebar switch harness. Same thing, you have a tab on the top. This is going to be your only connector on this side. Same thing, you have a latch. Go ahead and push up on that latch. Let that pop open. So just using a push-pull method, carefully pulling these wires out. So there is an extension on this wiring. That's why it's a little bit longer. Now because there is a twist grip sensor and a wiring harness from the right side, it's going to be a little bit more difficult getting this other side out. Just make sure you're not pulling on this too much. You don't want to disconnect it from there. So just make sure you're careful, taking your time. Once you get this out far enough, you want to stop pulling from here and start pulling from here. Now this one should come out a little bit easier because we have that other wiring out, but still you want to take your time getting this wire out. I believe this one has extensions as well, so those have a tendency to snag. Just kind of push, pull. You don't want to get too excited and pull these and disconnect those connectors. And there you have it. So like I said, if the bars allow it and they're pretty easy to get out, I would go ahead and try to get all that wiring out while the bars are still mounted to the bike. Just makes it a little easier because it is clamped down. Keeps those bars from moving around, making it a little easier to get that wiring out. So to get the bars off, you have 4 screws right here on the clamp and they're a 1/4" hex bit. Just make sure you're holding on to your bars when you're loosening this up. Now sometimes you're not gonna be able to get that clamp off because it's on there pretty good, depending how long it's been on there. So you can just kind of lift up on your bars to get it to break loose. Now what's really great about removing that nacelle is that now I can finally fine tune my Russ Vermont Designs front suspension, being able to access these clickers right here, especially when I change rider's weight, if I have a passenger or if I have a heavy load, I can easily adjust these now. All right, now I can remove the upper fork bracket or the top tree. Just make sure all your wires are out of the way. You do not need to remove the ignition switch or the bottom clamp. You want to loosen up this pinch bolt right here that's on your suspension, and then also on your left side you have a pinch bolt right here. Do not mess with your stem nut. You just want to loosen up this pinch bolt right here. And to loosen these up, it's a 1/4 inch hex bit. Now to loosen up the fork stem bolt, I'm using a 5/16 hex bit. Then from here, I should just be able to lift it right up. Just like that. All right, so here we have the COSO D2 digital gauges. Now the reason I wanted to go with these gauges is because I wanted to completely eliminate those bulky gauges. I don't want them sitting in the back or sitting in the front. They're always obstructing your view, and I just don't like the way they look. It's all rider's preference on how you want your T-bar setup to look, but for me, I want that clean look, so I'm going with these COSO gauges. Now, what's great about these gauges, you can customize them. It gives you all the information you need. Now, I've never installed COSO gauges before, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what these are all about. But yeah, this should be a very simple install. So let's get these unboxed and installed in the risers. All right, so in the box, you have your LCD meter, you have your meter adapter box. This gives you that plug and play option to plug directly into your stock connector. They provide you a zip tie and your instructions. Now with the COSO D2 gauges, it did not come with any screws, but you can pick up 4 of these screws at your local Harley Davidson. I would suggest you do that if you are gonna go with this setup. So basically this connector will connect into here. Now they do have a optional pressure sensor wire if you wanna go with the air pressure sensor kit. All right, so from here, I'll remove the top clamp. You do have 4 bolts on the top, and I'm using a 3/8 12-point socket. Now, what's great about these, Death Metal Racing does offer these in black, or you can get this in stainless steel. I believe there's another color, but you can get these in black and stainless. Now, COSO North America does offer a gasket on their website. Along with these brass inserts, Harley carries a similar gasket for their heads-up display, but with that gasket, you're not gonna get any inserts. Also, you can pick up a 12-inch extension. Let's say you're going with higher T-bars, you can pick up an extension for that, or if you wanna hide that box into the fairing. All right, so here I have the gasket from COSO North America. Now, installing one of these is really easy. You're just gonna install it onto your gauge. Don't do what I did. I did crack mine right there, but no big deal. Those brass inserts are gonna help hold that in. So all you're gonna do is just take your gauge and your gasket. You'll see which way it goes on once you look at it. It goes over your gauge like this with the cutouts down. Then you have these slots on your gasket. They're gonna sit right inside of here. So they're gonna sit inside of there just like that. So same thing on this side, just don't do what I did. I did crack mine on accident, so just be careful with these. I'm just gonna set these inside of here. Those brass inserts are gonna help hold it down. So I'll take the brass inserts, insert them to the back side, right through there. So make sure the gasket's properly seated on there, and then I'll just put this inside of here. Careful pushing down on the ends, you don't want to crack that plastic. So just make sure that your gasket is properly seated. So these are the screws that you're going to pick up from your local Harley Davidson for your heads-up display. Now these screws already have Loctite on them, but if they don't, make sure you apply some. So to tighten these down, I'm using a T15. Now there's no torque value for these, but I am tightening down on plastic, so I'll just get them down nice and snug. Now when you install your screws, you do want to add some blue Loctite. Now because I am taking this off later, I'm not going to put any blue Loctite, but I do suggest you add some blue Loctite when you install this. So I'll just get these down snug until we get the bars on. All right, so here we have the Thrash & Supply top tree or upper fork bracket. This is a great quality product from Thrash & Supply, all made in America. You have your Thrash & Supply logo right here, American flag, and then made in America. This is 6061 billet aluminum. They do have different options if you want to go with stainless steel or black. And then you have your hidden keyway right here, so you're able to lock up your bike. They do provide you with these plates right here because they do have 2 mounting locations, whether you want your bars closer to you or further away. I believe it's about 1 inch of adjustability, which is great that they give you that option. Say shorter arms, longer arms, you have that inch to play with. Then they give you these little cover plates so you can cover up that hole with whatever mounting location you're going with. Now this is solid mounted, so there's no need for bushings, and you also don't need to ground anything. That's why we got rid of the ground. They do provide you with 2 riser bolts that are just gonna go straight through here and into your risers. And these bolts do work with the Death Metal Racing risers. Now for the 3 pinch screws that are on here, I will be taking these out and adding some blue Loctite. That way when we go to tighten it down and torque it down, they stay in place, and then we'll get those risers installed onto here. Let's go. So to take these out and to tighten them down, I'm using a 1/4 inch hex bit and a 5/16 hex bit. Now on these pinch bolts, there is some packaging grease. You want to clean all that off before you add any Loctite. Now you will still have some inside the threads and inside of here, so just do your best to get that out. Now I'll install the risers onto the top tree. I am choosing the position that's closer to me, so I'll install this plate on the top. Then the riser bolts just go straight up through the top tree and into the risers. And same thing with these, I'll add some blue Loctite. And for these riser bolts, I'm using a 3/4 inch socket. Then once I get it onto the bike, I'll get them torqued down. Now having this clamp installed helps keep the riser square, so everything's nice and flush and straight. Now before you install your new top tree or your new upper fork support bracket, just want to make sure you clean off the surface, get any of that dirt and grime out of there. So this is just going to slide right on, get all your wires out of the way. Slide that onto there. Just make sure you're not crushing any wires when you're putting this on. Now if you are having trouble getting this on, you can take a rubber mallet and just tap it into place. So first thing I'll do is torque down the fork bracket to the steer stem pinch screw. The torque value for that is 22 to 26 foot-pounds. Now what I want to do is just verify that the upper fork bracket is evenly positioned on both forks, and then I'll tighten down the other 2 pinch screws. And the torque value for those is 14 to 18 foot-pounds. All right, so here we have the Sandoval open road adjustable bars. They have a lot of adjustability when it comes to the sweep and angles. You can change everything up. Now because these bars do have bushings built into them, it's going to be a lot more comfortable. It's going to be less vibration for those longer rides. Now these bars are probably going to be the easiest bars I've ever wired up because they are separate pieces. You can run that wiring through and then put the bars together. Now for the bar end and knuckles, these have been pre-installed, so you don't want to remove these screws. You just want to confirm that they're torqued down to 14 foot-pounds. Now we'll take these screws out and put some Loctite on them. That way they don't loosen up. All right, so I'm going to start off with the throttle side. Now because these bars do have a smaller diameter, it is a little tight with the throttle side and also the handlebar switch harness. So what I'm going to do is remove this plastic sleeve that's around this. It's pretty bulky, you don't need all that. You could also tighten it up with some electrical tape just to make it a lot smaller. That way you can fit your twist grip sensor and also your handlebar switch harness. Just be careful when you're removing this. You don't want to damage any of the cables. Now this is going to take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and cut here, and it'll be like I took this off in 2 seconds. So what I did is just remove the plastic sleeve from the twist grip sensor. You just want to be careful you're not cutting any of these wires. I removed that just because it is a little thicker to get through here. So getting rid of all that, it's going to make it a little bit slimmer. You could also tape this up just to clean it up. So here I'm going to take some silicone self-sealing tape and I'm going to tape off the end just to get the wires through. Now I'll take the right side handlebar switch harness and run this through. You just want to make sure that you have this facing the right direction, that these connectors are what go to the switch housing. So I'm going to tape off this end right here so nothing gets snagged. You don't want to damage these connectors. Just like that. So I'm going to run these in the opposite direction. Probably be a little bit easier than try to run them the other way. So I'll just pull these through the rest of the way until it's sitting flush in that keyway. So you want this to lock into here. So you kind of just push that in there, make sure it's all set in there just right. Get that lined up, get your other keyways lined up right here, and then get that pushed in all the way. So I have these all ran through. I'll get them all cleaned up once I get the other wires ran through the bar. Now we have only one cable for this side, so this side should be fairly easy. So what I like to do is just get all these labels off because they do have a tendency to snag. So I'll just take these off. So same thing, I'll remove this extension harness. And same thing with these, just make sure that your harness is running in the right direction. So come in through this direction. Kind of work that wire, let gravity do its work. All right, now that we have both sides wired up, we can wire it through the lower part of the bar and then get those top pieces attached. So for this lower part of the bar, it doesn't appear to be any left or right side, so you can have them this way or have them this way. So go ahead and run this side through first. Still want to be careful with these connectors. You do not want to depin them. Not a big deal if you do, but better if you don't. So those are ran through. I'll go ahead and run these through. All right, so now we'll get the clutch side ran through. Got one cable to worry about. So just take your time, pull that out a little bit, work that out, get that to set inside of there. You can see it tightens down on there, pull that cable. Now, I'm not gonna pull it all the way through because we still wanna mount our controls. So just make sure we got enough slack. Might need extensions, might not need extensions, we'll see. Now I will add Loctite on these screws. You have 3 right here that clamp down to the bar. Then you have a set screw right here. And then you have another screw right here on each side. You do have your built-in bushings right here. Very, very simple to get these wired up. I do suggest cutting that plastic sleeve that's on your twist grip sensor or your throttle wire just to make it a little bit easier to get these through. Now I will tape these up once I get everything installed just to clean up this look. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get these mounted on the bike. All right, so from here, I'll remove the clamp. Make sure those cables are routed this way. So I'll get the clamp on. So I'll get these started. Now, when you tighten these down, you always want to tighten them down in an X pattern. Now, there's no markings or knurling on these bars. When you clamp this down, you just want to make sure that they're centered. I would sit on the bike, get these as centered as possible to you, and then go ahead and tighten this down. So I'm just going to tighten down 2 of these so I can get these controls on and then get everything where I want it. All right, so now I'll install the throttle grip. You do have teeth on the insides. Once we slide it on here, you can check it. So I'll get that in there. Now, depending if you have a logo, you want to orientate that to whatever you want it at, and then just make sure it's locked in there. Now I'll reinstall the right-hand side control module. So you want to get your harness cable, you want to route that through this channel right here and then over these fingers and then connect them right here. Now you just want to line this up with your grip. Go ahead and lock it down and then connect your connectors. So now I'll get the switch housing back on. That's gonna sit over your grip to lock it into place. I'll get this all loosely installed. All right, so now I'll install the clutch side. Same thing, you wanna route this wiring, get that connected, push that in until you hear it click. Make sure it's routed through the channel so nothing gets pinched. Go ahead and clamp that down. I'll get this grip to lock in to the switch housing, get that to lock into there. Make sure it's set in place. Go ahead and tighten this down. All right, get the switch housing back on. It's gonna sit over your grip so it locks it into place. Make sure it's sitting over the grip. You can kind of mess around with your grip a little bit to get this to sit properly, just like that. Now I'm not gonna tighten these down all the way because I do wanna sit on the bike and get these where I want them. Don't forget to mount on your trigger finger switch cap. Same thing, you're gonna come in from the side, pop that on, and then just confirm that it's in there. All right, so from here, what I'm gonna do is go ahead and plug in the D2 digital gauges. You have your adapter right here. This larger end obviously goes to the actual stock connector. Just gonna push that in until you hear those click. And then you plug this other connector to the bottom of the D2 gauges. You just wanna make sure you line that up. It's only gonna go on one way. You'll just push that in until you hear it click. Now, before I clean these wires up and pull all that excess wiring into the fairing, what I'll do is run a test on all my switches, make sure everything works, to include the gauge. So I have my left handlebar switch harness. I'll go ahead and plug this one in. Then I have my run stop switch along with my right handlebar switch harness. These only go in one way. Then I have my twist grip sensor. I'll go ahead and plug this in. If you have heated grips, you would plug them into here. Plug that in, it only goes on one way. Now that I checked everything and everything works, what I'll do now is go ahead and wrap these wires up in that self-sealing tape. I'm also going to use a braided sleeve. That way I can protect these wires, give it a little bit more cleaner look. Now, when you're cleaning your wires up and you're pulling that excess wire into the neck and into the fairing, you want to give yourself enough slack where you can turn all the way left and all the way right. Now, if you're going with this same setup and you are using a COSO gauge, it's only going to go as far as this box right here for the COSO gauge. So that's as far as your braided sleeve is going to go. So any wires that I'm not using, I got those all tucked into the fairing. Just went through the neck and then tucked as many as I could inside of here. So what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and just clean these up, get these zip tied, get them out of the way. That way I can reinstall the headlight. So here I have the housing for the Power Vision. This is from Death Metal Racing. I believe they teamed up with my machinist to get these made. This is a great quality product from Death Metal Racing. Love the way this looks. It's gonna house that Power Vision, give me some more information than the gauge offers. So here I have the clamp that's gonna clamp onto the risers. Then I have the 3-inch arm extension. I do believe they have a 1-inch and also a 2-inch. I wanted this to raise up a little bit just past the gauges. Now, the screws that I did receive with the Power Vision housing, for some reason they did not match up with my Power Vision on the back as far as the threads. So I did purchase these M4 8mm flathead socket cap screws. These match up perfectly with the Power Vision and also the housing. Now, if I did go with the 10-inch risers from Death Metal Racing, I could easily mount that Power Vision housing right underneath. Now, I could move the risers forward on the top tree and possibly fit it in there, but then I run the risk of hitting my tank with it. So for me, I'm gonna mount it on the back where it's above the gauge. So you have these grooves right here. It's gonna sit on this groove right here, and then you're just gonna take the other end and slide it behind here and mount it on. Now, it's on you what side you want facing up. I'm gonna have this side facing up. So to tighten down these two screws, I'm using a 3/16 hex bit. So I'm not gonna add any blue Loctite to these screws right now. I wanna ride with this setup for a little bit to see exactly where I want it. Once I have it set to where I want it, then I'll add some blue Loctite. So I'll go ahead and mount the extension arm. So about right here is where I'm going to mount it. I could probably get even closer. And then I still have a straight line of sight to my radio. Now for these other two screws, I'm using a 1/4-inch hex bit. So you have your entry for your cable right through here. The easiest way to do this is run your cable in through first, because once you have the Power Vision mounted, you're not gonna be able to connect your cable. I'll go ahead and connect the Power Vision, pull that through. Now before I get it secured on the back, I'm gonna turn it on just to make sure that it works. So to get the screws in the back, I'm using a 2.5mm hex bit. Now there's no torque value on these, so I'll just get them down snug. Now for these handlebars, you will be able to use your stock brake assembly and your stock clutch assembly, but you will not be able to use your stock perch clamps. They're just a little bit too big, and they do have locking pins that prevent you from mounting it on. So I did pick up a set of Proline perch half clamps from Kraus. These are in black. They do have these in polished finish. So make sure you pick up a set of half clamps. Now there's no left or right side, and whichever way you put this logo, it's always gonna be right side up. So now I'll remount the clutch side assembly. So this fatter side is going to go towards your switch housing. And with these clamps, they do provide you with screws. I won't tighten them down all the way because I do want to adjust these a little bit. Now I'll mount the brake side. Just be careful with your switch. You don't want to shear that off or break that off. So these bars have full adjustability. You can bring them in or push them out. You also have the ability to turn the bar ends, and then you also have a 5.5-inch rise. Now obviously you're gonna adjust your bars to however you want, whatever your comfort level is. I like to ride it a few times and then get it set where I want it. So I'll set it initially, I'll get things tightened down, and then I'll go for a ride, 200, 300 mile ride, and see exactly where I wanna have it. I have clear view of my gauges, my power vision, and also my stereo, so there's nothing obstructing my view. Got rid of those bulky gauges and just went with this simple gauge right here. It tells me everything I need to know, and then if there's any other information I want to know, I also have my power vision. Now I can always change up the gauges for the fuel and the volts. Don't really need that because I have it on these COSO gauges right here. So now that I have everything exactly where I want it, I have my switch housing where I want it, I have my brake and my clutch assembly exactly where I want them, I'll go ahead and clamp it down, and then I'll get everything else torqued down. Now for the clamp on the bars, you want to tighten that down in a cross pattern. Now the torque value for the handlebar clamp screws, I'm going to go with 16 to 20 foot-pounds. Now these screws on each side are 14 foot-pounds. Your set screws right here on each side are 8 foot-pounds, and if you convert it to inch-pounds, is 96 inch-pounds. These screws on the bar ends are 14 foot-pounds. And then these screws on the bottom are 8 foot-pounds. Now for the brake and the clutch clamp screws, I'm gonna go with 60 to 80 inch-pounds. Now the easiest way I found to torque these riser bolts down is just to turn your handlebars all the way and get an extension in there and torque those down. Now the torque value for these riser bolts is 30 to 40 foot-pounds. All right, so now it's time to reinstall the outer fairing. I organized all my wires, pulled everything inside the fairing, and then I remounted my headlight. As you can see, I have a brand new headlight. This is the Hogworks Performance LED headlight. This is the most powerful, most brightest LED that Hogworks offers. They do offer 3 configurations. You have your silver tooth, your gold tooth, and your saber tooth. I have all 3, so I will be doing a whole install, ride, and review video on those. So make sure you don't miss that video. Right now, I'm just gonna reinstall the outer fairing. So the same way you took it off, you're gonna mount it right back on. So don't forget to reconnect your turn signals. Now I did remove the nacelle, but that also included the fairing skirt. Now it's up to you whether you want to reinstall it or just leave it off. I'm gonna put mine back on. So you have 2 mounting locations right here for your fairing skirt, and I'm reusing the same OEM screws.